Hello, this is James from the PlayStation blog. I'm here with Shaun McCabe from Insomniac Games, and we're here to talk about Ratchet and Clank All for One. Now, forgive me if you don't agree with me, but I think this is the four-player co-op is probably the biggest addition to the Ratchet and Clank series, at least this generation.
Yeah, absolutely.
How has the team felt about taking on that new challenge and adding that?
You know, it was one of those things that really resonated with us from the start. I mean, it was early on when we were talking about, you know, what can we do with the Ratchet universe? And somebody said, well, it would be really cool to do a Ratchet and Clank game. I mean, we've been wanting to do that forever, where you can play Ratchet and Clank at the same time. It is what it's called. And then just somebody threw out the idea of, hey, well, what if we had 4 players? What if we throw in, you know, Captain Quark and Dr. Nefarious at the same time? And everybody dug that from the beginning, which is cool. And these are folks, many of whom have been working on this series for 10 years, you know, and including, you know, some of the guys that created Ratchet the character. So there was a lot of early excitement at the prospect of getting these characters together and just and kind of taking Ratchet into the co-op space. Like it felt like exactly the right thing for us to do.
I was at Gamescom last year when the game was announced.
Yeah.
And I spoke to Ted Price recently. He wasn't able to say too much, but he did touch on sort of cooperative, competitive. So it wasn't all working together necessarily all the time. How does that come into play?
Right. The main way it comes to play is in bolt collection. And so Ratchet in the past has been about smashing things, blowing stuff up, getting bolts, buying new weapons, and then going back and doing the same thing. The twist that we've put on in All for One is that players share bolts. So if we're playing together, we are collecting bolts that go into a common pool that we can that we'll get at the end of the round. But if you collect the most bolts, you get a cool bonus at the end of every segment. So there's a lot of incentive to play together because you want to progress through the game. But as soon as you have the opportunity to, you know, screw the other players, you totally want to take advantage of that. So that, I mean, that's the competitive layer. And just around the office, like, we are insanely competitive with it and can think of all kinds of nasty tricks that we can play on each other.
I don't know how much you're able to talk about the story in Ratchet and Clank All for One, but I think a lot of people are going to be curious as to how these 4 characters that haven't always been the best of friends suddenly come together.
Well, I can just give you a brief overview on how that happens. Ratchet and Clank are with Captain Quark, who's now the president of the galaxy, of course, because that was the logical step for him, and Dr. Nefarious comes in to try and take his final revenge, and everything goes bad, and they are kidnapped by a mysterious robot that takes them to another world. And so these 4, to get off this world and to battle this robot and defeat this robot, have to work together. That being said, at least in the story, you'll see that these guys aren't friends. Like, especially Quark and Nefarious are always doing mean stuff to each other, which is hilarious. I mean, I think that tension, the tension that you see in the characters in the story is reflected in the gameplay, which is really awesome.
So you sort of touch on it there. How do the characters' abilities vary? Are they all very similar, or are they all very, depending on who you choose, very distinct in terms of playability? I
mean, obviously they're different looking. They all get different funny VO. There are functional differences to the characters. We're not at the point where we've discussed any of that. I'm going to leave that for a later time, but suffice to say that there will be advantages to playing one and disadvantages to playing each one.
And in terms of the accessibility, can you just sort of drop in and drop out, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, especially for the online experience, there's definite drop in, drop out. The same thing for couch play. Easy to get people in, easy to get them out. The accessibility is one of the most important things. Like, we don't want people to have to wait really for anything just to get in the game. We want people to get in as fast as possible. And just as far as the accessibility goes, I mean, that is part of the Ratchet DNA and Insomniac DNA. We want people to be able to play our games. And so this one, I think, you know, is accessible. You know, one of the big changes that we made in All for One is moving away from a follow cam to a director's cam. And one of the really cool things that you get out of that, aside from the fact that you get some amazing visuals, is that people don't have to worry about controlling using the right stick for the camera. So even right there, you get some amount of accessibility back.
And I mean, just to close, I won't keep you too much longer, but from previous interviews with guys from Insomniac, I always know you really enjoy talking about your sort of tech, whether it's fur or whether it's the water that you've got, or increasing the size of your environments. Is there anything that you're really excited about in All for One?
There is that I can't talk about just yet, but there is, yeah, there are a couple things that I'm really excited about. Still pushing the power of the PS3, still, I don't know, getting the last few drops out of the system.
Okay, thank you for your time, Shaun.
Yeah, thanks.